Hello, this is Kyra Magna, and this is Newage H56 Rhedosaurus, their version of G1 Sludge. This is the original toon deco of the figure. We're going to take a look at him, but first, we're going to take a look at the box. It's a nice Diaclone homage with some G1 styled artwork, and there's a window where the figure was, as well as featuring some nice photography on the back. You also get an instruction manual on how to transform the figure. I'm going to note that there is a little bit of new formatting here, with the character render sort of above some of the transformation steps, which is a little disorienting. And as well, something I've never seen is a be careful the paint mark. So, if you are rotating this dino leg here, be careful not to scratch the paint. As for accessories, there is a decent selection. You get 2 of these leg filler pieces for Grimlock. They're fairly detailed compared to the rest of the figure, which I find a little off-putting, but they are fully painted, and these will actually fit onto Grimlock fairly easily. As you can see, there is a few ports on here and a few ports in here. And you just push them in like so. And the same with the other side, except the ports are on the leg and here has the holes. And you can easily push that on too. And I like the look of these, to be honest with you. They flesh out the legs a lot. The greeble details on them are a little ugly, but they're not as bad as I thought they'd be getting them in hand. They're very close to the G1 toy, which I'm not really into. I definitely think the flat should have been sort of portrayed like the rest of the figure, but they make a very nice piece, and I'm definitely going to be using them for my display. Please note that they are a parts-forming piece and do not stay on during transformation to T-Rex mode. You get Sludge's blaster, which is sculpted perfectly to the cartoon look. It's fairly large, and most of the pieces are unpainted except for the yellow on the tip, I believe. And it will sit in his fist hand by plugging into the port. A little tight, but it does go in and he will hold it well. You get some L and R open hands that actually come on a articulated hinge at the wrist, like so. To swap out the hands, you simply get the fist hand here and pull it out of the port like so. Then you take the alternate hand you're trying to push in and slot it back into the port. And as you can see, he has full wrist articulation when using these, which I find incredibly useful. You also get an alternate pair of eyes for the alt mode, featuring one of those famous cartoon smear frames from the movie. And these will sort of clip in quite easily. You just lift this up the same way you would to switch the eyes. Push it across like so, and then collapse it back down. And you get these very funny looking googly eyes. I absolutely love this. This is one of the best accessories I've had in a very long time, I think. And you also get some yellow claws still on the sprue. So these are actually unpainted, which does not match the yellow on the rest of the figure. The figure was initially revealed with these yellow claws in place because they copied an error on a color sheet made by a fan. Because of this, they ended up including them anyway, since some people seemed attached to them, even though most of the time in the cartoon they were not drawn in. You can swap them out by punching the pins here, which I'm not going to do because I don't feel comfortable doing that to my fully painted figure, but it is a nice option, I think. Here's a quick comparison of what the toe might look like when you slot it on. All right, and here is the figure itself. And immediately, as always with many New Age figures, the paint is going to absolutely stick out. That finish is gorgeous. All the gray is painted, all the red is painted, his head is fully painted, etc. Looks gorgeous, as to be expected. As for sculpt coming in from the head down, we have a very nice cartoon head sculpt. I'm really into this. I think that it's very well sculpted, and the paint is also gorgeous with some metallic flecked eyes, which always look nice, picking up some light. I do think that the helmet could have been slightly thinner, but that's sort of a preference thing, and it didn't really matter how it appeared in the cartoon because it would sort of fluctuate a bit anyway. Coming down to the chest here, there's a little bit of sculpt breakup with some hinges. There's some red fully painted, of course. I don't believe this gray in the chest is painted. I don't think any of these sort of gray is painted at all on the figure. But having a look at the arms as well, they are fully painted gray in that nice deco. Once again with that gorgeous cartoon accurate sculpting, including the gray toes, which you would have heard about earlier. There's the little breakup on the shoulder here as well. Coming down to the crotch and hip section, There is a little bit of breakup for where the hip skirts will go, and then of course some detailing like in the cartoon. And coming down to the legs, there's some nice blue and black accents painted on. Once again, with that gorgeous cartoon shape, very angular. I'm a large fan of how these are sort of sculpted, very dynamic as well as on the thighs. Coming in from the side here, of course, you have the wings, which look great. And from the back as well, those wings have some nice details on them, some gorgeous painted details here. And then, of course, you have the dinosaur head sitting back here. I think that the rest of the back is extremely clean as well. I am going to note that if you lift up this dinosaur head, there are some dinosaur legs sitting in there that look kind of ugly and maybe should have been covered. That said, they stick out only a little bit when the dinosaur head is closed over them, so it's not the end of the world. Fantastic sculpt overall, and really nailed the cartoon, and the proportions look gorgeous. Props to Newage for that. As for articulation, once again, coming in from the head down, the head is on a ball joint that will look, as far as you'll need it, all the way to the side, left and right. He will also look all the way up thanks to the carved out ball joint at the back. A teensy bit down, a little bit of wiggle left and right, and that's pretty much it. He kind of bumps up against himself, and this joint will get very tight, but you can manipulate it, but do worry about some paint scratching, of course. Coming in from the arms now, they have the shoulder on a hinge joint, gets you up to there about 90 degrees. It's fine. Could be a little higher, could be a little, could be lower as well, so I don't particularly mind it. And at the elbow here, you actually get a double jointed elbow with a very smart sculpt break usage. So you get the full 180, especially if you push these toes out of the way, which are also technically an articulation point. You pretty much get 180 with this very nicely sculpted elbow joint. I'm a huge fan of that. Or you just get the sort of regular 90 at each, and it still looks great. Very well engineered articulation there. At the waist, you get a full waist swivel 360 as expected. Perfect. And an ab crunch as is standard now, which gets you just a hair past 90 degrees and leaves a very, very gappy opening in the back there. But, you're not going to be showing them off from the side when you're using the ab crunch that heavily, I imagine. Coming in from the legs, there's a lot to talk about. So at the hips, you can go out 90 degrees or just over. The problem with this is that the legs actually sort of collapse under their own weight and fall down, as you can see, which is very rare for Newage to sort of tolerance something like that. So I'm a little unimpressed. But, he does have the articulation and will hold it when touching the ground. It's just when you want him to have those kicking out to the side poses is when you're going to run into issues. And as for forward kick, you get forward kick past 90. Perfect. No need for more than that. And because of how the hip skirts are designed with these very smart sort of rotating hips that go into the design itself, you get a decent amount of back as well, up to about here, and then the butt plate will actually rotate up, and you can get almost just shy of 90 out the back as well, which, you're never going to need that much, but absolutely have the option, which is what we like to see. Coming in from the knees now, the knees will bend on one single joint just past 90 degrees. It's not the greatest knee joint in the world. I don't think that the character particularly calls for a full 180 knee bend, especially with how thick and chunky the legs are. It can be very hard to do. But otherwise, I think it absolutely works, so I'm not going to really complain about that. And at the foot, there is an ankle rotation that will get you, about 90 degrees. I'll also note while we're here that the ankle rotation is the toe held into this foot plate here. And so you can obviously disconnect it, but because of this, sometimes when you pull the toe out, it actually ends up rotating just a little bit more past where this is. So make sure to pull the foot plate out first and then put the toe in, and then you'll get the foot sitting flat. Otherwise, the foot will sort of raise up a little bit like this. So rotate it past where you need, and then sort of push it in, and it'll be okay. And you can see the outward hip joint sort of being loose there as well. Not my favorite in the world for sure. And at the back here, the wings are articulated on a hinge. They'll go you know, back all the way, forward as far as the arm will allow to about there. So, you know, you can get him out of the way if you need him to do any specific posing that might get in the way of the wings. Overall, I think the articulation is pretty strong. There's not really a ton missing that I could ask for. Maybe some toe tilt just because of the size of the figure, but the toes are already somewhat complex, and so I'm not going to sort of hark on it for that too much. Yeah, fantastic. Even more posable than Grimlock, so definitely a step up. Huge fan. As for some size comparisons, here he is with Newage's Bumblebee 2.0 mold, so, you know, kind of huge. Here he is with both the Newage and Magic Square Optimus Primes. So yeah, about the correct scale. Here he is with Magic Square's Shockwave. And last but not least, of course, here he is with Newage's Grimlock. He's actually just a hair taller than him, but you really can't tell unless you're looking for it. And of course, both figures have to be fully unposed. So of course, that scale is perfect for the cartoon scale that Newage loves to go for. I think that they look fantastic together, both their paint job size and aesthetic. Alright, so to transform this guy, it is a bit of a process. So you have to kind of untab the body, which is obscenely tight, far too tight tolerance. I've never had such a tight Newage tolerance in my life. And then from there, you start to sort of sandwich everything inside to those dino wings, and you sort of flip out the dinosaur head. In that point, you know, the dino legs will pop out, and you kind of have the first half. And the legs are a little more complicated. There's a bunch of panels you have to flip in and out, which they kind of went out of their way to make sure they didn't have that gappiness that Grimlock had, which I appreciate. But it does make the legs more complicated. Otherwise, you just sort of rotate them around and pop out the dino legs, pop out the tail, that sort of thing. And then they sort of inverse, and then you sort of get the other half of the dinosaur. It's not the most complex transformation in the world. I wish that some of the tolerances weren't so god-awful tight. There's also a couple of clearance issues as noted on the instructions with the paint. But once you get it all together, it does look quite nice. So let's take a look at him. All right, and here is Rhedosaurus in his alt mode. And wow, it is beautiful at a glance. So of course, now you get to see the fully painted wings sort of shining through with that nice light gray accent, looking amazing. You get the tail as well, sort of breaking it up. And there's a little gray panel here as well, which was sort of not featured on the promotional pictures for this guy. They ended up paying it anyway, which looks fantastic. I absolutely adore that gray there. Definitely better than the sort of red breaking up the sort of perfect form of this guy. So sort of coming around here, we have the fully painted yellow head. Looks fantastic. The eyes are a little receded for my tastes, and I think this is due to the eye gimmick, which also gives an ugly little slit through the head. Not a fan of either of those choices. I'm not sure why they decided to use the red to blue eye switching gimmick. I think that it's kind of a useless gimmick in which that this thing is not aiming to be toy accurate in any way, and the red eyes are a toy reference like used on the original Takara Masterpiece Grimlock. So I don't really see why it would have the eye switching gimmick. I understand that it matches Grimlock, but Grimlock shouldn't have had it either, considering they had toy and Toon decos available. Anyhow, you have the neck, which is very sort of rounded in shape, looks fantastic. This sort of whole round, all the rounded shapes look fantastic considering how boxy the robot mode was. Getting these nice shapes out is phenomenal. We're on the back as well, so clean, very gapless in sculpt. Let's clean up that leg a little bit there. And then you get these nice little details on the side here. The toes here sort of break up the top as well. Lots of panel break up on the legs and some hinges, but I'm not going to sort of fault it. It's absolutely necessary and looks passable. The tail sort of breaks up on one side when articulated, but that's to be expected, and I think that it works. So yeah, I mean, phenomenal sculpt overall. I cannot believe this. It's so accurate, and it's so sort of alive and characterful, which is exactly what you want to see. He's quite huge as well. The whole figure's kind of huge and weighty, but because the wings sort of fill out so much of this mode, he just really feels huge for an alt mode. Absolutely love it. Anyhow, for some articulation in this mode, there is a lot, which is fantastic. You never see that in Dino mode, so let's talk about it. So number one, at the neck here, you're going to have the jaw on a hinge, which will open about that much. And in there as well, there is a port which you can plug Grimlock's Flame Blast effect into if you desire. So yeah, you know, the mouth opens about 90 degrees. The neck here is on a hinge and will look down about that much. and we'll look back up again about that much as well. Perfect. Then this yellow neck segment can rotate 360 on what I think is a ball joint and wiggle waggle a little bit up, down, left, right, that sort of thing. And you can kind of rotate it and then combine it to get sort of those sort of angles that you want. There's another segmented piece here, which you can do the exact same thing with. It's ball jointed, will rotate 360 degrees around and can wiggle it. So you can use this to get these extreme neck angles. Look at that. That's fantastic. Absolutely love it. And you can just sort of bend that. I think this is sort of the default position for it, which also looks great. Absolutely love it. There's, of course, the little breakups in here. Completely acceptable considering the range of articulation you get on the neck. You never see dino neck articulation like that. It's normally just the jaw, and if you're lucky, the sort of rotation on the head. Yeah, fantastic from Newage there. Coming into this dino legs as well. So over here, these are sort of, they'll move and swivel around 360 like this and move out like about that much. Fantastic. At the knee, there is also some bend. You can get some bend like this. If you pull out, you can see this screw here, then you can actually get it to bend about this much at the knee, but then it cannot come all the way back in. But, you know, it's a fantastic option and can absolutely use that to fake some poses. I mean, is it even faking it at that point? It is a real knee joint, just sort of has some things in the way of it. And at the toe here, you can bend it forward a bit, bend it backward a bit, and the toes themselves can sort of move down. Obviously, this is to transform them inwards, but we're going to leave them out. Now, as for the back legs, sort of a similar scheme. You can rotate 360 around as far as you need. You can go out just past 90 degrees, and at the knee, you get a little bit of bend there, about that much, forward or back. And then the toes are also hinged. So yeah, fantastic on these as well. The last sort of piece of articulation that you'll see is on the tail, which features 3 segments. So each segment can go one left, right, etc. And then on top of that, the tip is ball jointed, so you can actually get some rotation on it. I'm not sure why you'd want to do that, but you can do it and sort of get some nice articulation there as well. So yeah, I mean, this is one of the most articulated G1 Dinobots I've ever seen. It kind of blows me away. So if you are into the articulation game on this sort of thing, highly recommend this for that reason. Fantastic ult mode overall. Gimmicks wise, you can switch the eye color just like on Ymir Grimlock, in which case you just pull this up and then sort of rotate this section around. And then you have some red eyes. It's a little hard to screw that on camera, so I sort of did it off camera. But, you know, I think there's a screw hole, so you know how to do it. The red eyes look fine. I don't know why you'd ever want red eyes on a toon-styled Dinobot, though. For some size comparisons, here he is with Magic Square's Optimus Prime. So, you know, I mean, he's kind of huge, which is to be expected for a Dinobot. Perfect scale. And here he is with Newage's Grimlock. I think that the scale also works. I think Sludge could be just a teensy bit bigger for this sort of scale, but you know, it absolutely works, and the bot modes are the sort of prioritized scale and they work perfectly. So yeah, I mean, works great for me. And as for my final thoughts on the figure, I'm going to talk about some of the negatives. So the biggest negative on this figure is easily those extremely tight tolerances. So when transforming the figure, as I talked about, there is some very tight tolerances that only loosen up after a few transformations and are still a little too tight for my liking. Terrible. You should never have to feel like you have to put enough force to break a figure just to transform it. And the other negative, I think, is actually the loose tolerances. So it's sort of on the ankle and on the kick out to the side on the leg. Just weaker than you'd expect from Newage. You kind of have a very strong tolerance game. For some positives, though, the build is fantastic with some die cast throughout and gorgeous paint. The sculpt is perfect for the G1 cartoon. It is phenomenal. I cannot believe they pulled it off to be a perfect sculpt in both modes. And the articulation is phenomenal for what it is. It's not lacking very much at all, and I think that you can hit almost any pose that you aim for. So this figure is a pretty strong recommend for me if you're in on these Dinobots. If you like Sludge himself specifically, If you like cartoon accurate figures, if you like well-articulated Dinobots, I mean, the list sort of goes on, especially picking up those later redecos, which I'm sure will tune those tolerances up to perfection. Highly recommend this figure. It's an absolute blast. Anyhow, thank you all for watching. I've been Magna. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See ya.